What's going on, everyone? So we got some new updates in regards to the upcoming Scream 7. But these updates, I want you all to take with a huge grain of salt until it's been confirmed by the studio or the actor and actress by themselves. Just take this stuff with a big grain because anything could change. You're getting stories from people that may or may not be true. But shout outs to Critical Overlord. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with his YouTube channel and his X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. But this comes via him. So Courtney Cox apparently is 100% down to return. This rumor is coming from a recent encounter that Cox had with someone. Apparently, again, I don't like those kind of like, oh, well, it's the telephone game, right? It's a little concerning, but it does make sense. We'll talk more in depth into that in a minute. The filming should start this summer. That kind of makes sense. Again, they want to try to get this out by 2025 at some point. So you got to imagine that they're going to want to get this filmed and finished by like the end of this year, right? So that makes some sense. And then the story is still split in two. First half will be for Sidney and the other half for the newbies. Now, as soon as Sidney was announced, and Neve Campbell confirmed it, that is something that we know is a reality, right? Neve is in this film. Kevin Williamson is directing, right? We got some actual confirmation in some of this stuff. But this latest news, the splitting of like, hey, part of this is Sidney's story, part of this is the newbie story. That was something that was kind of floated around even before like the Core 4 and everybody and the whole Melissa Barrera thing, all that stuff. So would kind of make sense that this is kind of, like kind of a split film. You're introducing new characters that maybe you could potentially continue making films on. You got to remember Spyglass and Paramount, all them, like they all are trying to make as many movies as possible because they spent like $500 million to get the rights to Scream and the entire catalog. But Scream was one of the big money blockbusters, right? So if they can pump out Scream 10, 11, 12, 15, then they're going to try to do that, obviously. So the idea, my guess, again, this is my interpretation, is that you have Sidney, you kind of do a conclusive Sidney story, kind of wrap everything up into a little bow. You introduce some new characters. You hope, at least one, if not several of those characters hit, especially the ones that survive, right? Like, I would imagine that you're going to have maybe, let's call it 7 new characters with Sidney and Gale, right? Okay. Maybe you throw in like a Mark Kincaid, maybe Kirby comes back, right? So you have something like 10 to 11 characters total. You got to figure 2 to 3 will be Ghostface. Obviously, none of those Ghostface will be Sidney or, Gale or very likely Kirby or Kincaid or anything like that. So it'll likely be amongst the new group. So let's call it 7 characters. 2 or 3 end up dying as Ghostface. And then you have maybe 2 survive along with Sidney or whatever that you kind of carry over, right? Maybe it's a couple. Maybe it's, sisters again. Maybe it's brothers. Maybe it's a brother and a sister. I don't know. We will see. Time will tell, I'm sure, as things continue to develop, continue to grow. We will get more information. But it does kind of make sense that you would kind of intertwine this new cast in with the Sidney story and kind of potentially position yourself for more films, or at least kind of set up for, even if it's like later on down the road, you kind of kick the can, give a little year or 2 break, whatever. Now, as far as Gale Weathers' return and Courtney Cox returning, I mean, this to me, I kind of felt and feel is a given. Again, I don't like the telephone game. I don't like this person spoke to Courtney Cox, and it's like, okay, like Courtney Cox saying, hey, I would love to be back, doesn't necessarily mean that she is or that she will or whatever, right? How much of it was just the PC answer, right? Like, what is she going to say now that franchise is trash now? I'm done with it. Like, like, what is she supposed to say, right? So, again, take that part of it with a grain of salt. However, Courtney Cox returning to Scream, I fully expect it in many ways. Especially as soon as Neve came on, I was like, I even said in the video, like, we're probably going to get Courtney back as Gale Weathers, you got to imagine she's going to return, right? Still curious to see how do they approach this. Are they going to go with like a retcon version? Is this going to pick up after Scream 6 to where, Gale was just, hanging on by a thread? I'm curious to see how they play that out, but it does make sense that you would have Gale Weathers in this film. Courtney Cox has always been one of the first people to sign on, even Scream 6. I believe she was the first to get the script and basically re-up on the film. So my guess is that, like, hey, she's probably going to do these as long as they're willing to pay her, give her some money, and give her some consistent work, right? So I do expect Courtney Cox to reprise her role as Gale Weathers, which again I'm all for. I'm excited for, as long as she has a real role. Like, I hated her arc, I guess, or I don't even know what you want to call it, in Scream 6. Like, I felt there was zero reason to have her in that film. Like, you could have done that entire film without Gale Weathers and nothing would have changed. Like, the only thing that she did was, reveal the shrine room and stuff. But even Dermot Mulroney's character was like, oh, I was going to reveal that to you guys and pretend like I stumbled across. So, like, he could have done it. Like, there was literally nothing that Gale Weathers did in that film that was like, oh man, that's what you needed Gale Weathers for. Like, and I think that they should have killed her, right? Like, you set all that up, you did all that, you had that brutal attack, and it just to have her survive off camera in like throwaway dialogue, I just thought was horrible execution. Like, I wasn't a fan of that at all. Like, my thing is, like, you put us through it, you might as well have just killed her. Or at least left it open, right? Don't confirm her alive off camera. Like, keep us guessing. Because the idea was you were going to make a Scream 7 regardless, even before the Melissa stuff, right? Like, they knew that they were going to do a Scream 7. So my thing was, like, you might as well have, like, just kept it ominous and had us guessing. And that could have been a real point for this film, and kind of gave us a little just, and angst and anxiety going into, like, is she alive, is she dead, what's going on, right? I think that would have been a better approach with this, but I'm pretty confident that Gale Weathers will return and Courtney Cox will be back. Now, obviously, there's always the chance that she won't, but just based on her history with Scream and stuff, which I think is funny considering that, like, she was very open and public about her not wanting to be a part of Scream 4. Like, she wanted to be killed in Scream 4. She didn't want to continue going on. She didn't want to be in 5, 6, 7 or whatever. And then Wes Craven kind of talked her out of it. So I think it's kind of funny that, like, now she would have been in 3, if she returns to this one, 3 more films since. Which, look, I'm not going to complain about having Courtney Cox, Gale Weathers. I love me some Gale Weathers, but I do think it's kind of funny, kind of interesting. But just in general, right? Like, to me, you're going to have new characters. Okay, great, right? That is kind of a given. Like, I don't think it was just going to be like Sidney and Kincaid and Gale, right? Like, I would imagine that there's going to be probably a couple handfuls of characters that you're going to reintroduce or introduce or, build the story around. You got to have killers. You got to, there's going to be a lot going on in this. So there being new characters, I don't think is, oh my God, this is groundbreaking. But to me, like, can we just get some good character development? Like, my concern is, like, the writing of these characters for Scream 5 and 6 has just been bad. Right? Like, Scream 5, I thought they did a terrible job of just building the characters in the core 4. Right? Like, you got out of Scream 5 and it was like, I mean, 90% of the Scream fandom hated Sam. Like, everyone, like, no one liked Sam for the most part. I was pretty defensive of Sam. Like, the more I watched Scream 5, the more I liked Sam in Scream 5. But, like, the consensus seemed to be that, like, hey, Sam's character is trash. Everyone loved Jenna Ortega, but that's Jenna Ortega, and her acting was just great. But even her, like, she didn't have this, like, great story arc. She was just basically in a hospital bed most of the time. Like, you didn't get to really know much about her, right? You didn't get to know much about Richie or, like Amber or any, like, even Vince was extremely underwhelming. Like, I just thought they did a terrible job building those characters in Scream 5. In Scream 6, I thought they did a better job, but it still wasn't great. Like, one of the big things that was so successful about the original Scream was the character development and the story of each character. It's like you got and understood which each character was. And you fell in love with each character for their specific, kind of quirks. And they did a great job of just building, right? Like Stu was an excellent character that to this day people want to return because he was so great and so beloved, right? Like Billy, you understood who Billy was. You understood who Tatum was. You understood who Randy was. Like they were able to build these characters through dialogue. And one of the things that I hit on the last few years about the Scream franchise is a lot of, like, if you watch the original Scream, they were building those characters together, right? And they did a better job of that in Scream 6, but I still didn't think it was great, right? But you saw in Scream, in the original Scream, there were very few moments, if any, where it wasn't multiple characters together having dialogue. It was usually they were in groups, right? It was usually 3 or 4 of them, right? It's Randy, Stu, and Billy. It's, Tatum, Dewey, and Sidney. It's Gale, Dewey, and Sidney. It's, Gale, Tatum, and Sidney. So you got to really get an understanding and grasp of each of the characters through collective dialogue. So instead of getting to know one character, you got to know 3 at the time simultaneously, things like that. I think those kind of things go a real long way. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think of this news? Are you excited for Courtney Cox, Gale Weathers potentially being back? What do you think of them introducing new characters? What are your thoughts on everything? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.